Good morning, everyone. I'm Heather Schaefer, Assistant Bureau Chief of the Securities and Regulated Industries Bureau at the Iowa Insurance Division. It's great to have you here today to learn more about senior financial exploitation. This training is important in protecting investors, which is a common interest we share with you. Now I'd like to introduce you to Elijah Hansen, a senior financial exploitation investigator. Elijah?
Good morning, and I'll echo what Heather says, thanking you all for being here today. So, with the passage of a senior financial exploitation law in Iowa in 2021, this created an opportunity under the Securities Bureau of the Iowa Insurance Division to have a position dedicated strictly to senior financial exploitation. That's the creation of my job with an extremely long title. So, I've been with the Iowa Insurance Division since 2021, exactly 1 year today, and have been in this role since I was hired. So prior to being hired with the Iowa Insurance Division, I spent 15 years as a police officer in a couple local municipal police departments here in Iowa. And during that time, I spent time as a school resource officer, detective, and I ended my career as a patrol sergeant. So once again, thank you for taking the time to be here, and I'll turn it over to Heather.
Thank you, Elijah. And I've already introduced myself, so I'll just add that similar to Elijah, I come from a law enforcement background and have worked in state government as a regulator since leaving law enforcement. Lastly, before we get started, I'd like to add a few housekeeping items. We'd like to make this training as interactive as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask questions throughout the training. I'd ask that if you do have a question, to type the question in the chat box by clicking on the message bubble on the bottom right of the screen. I'll be monitoring and ask your questions when we have a chance. If you'd rather ask the question directly to us, just click on the raise hand icon in the middle of the screen to notify us that you have a question. When you have a chance, I'll acknowledge you and ask that you unmute yourself and ask the question. We'll also have an opportunity for questions at the conclusion of our training. Until then, I'd ask that you stay on mute to minimize any background noise. So Elijah, what are we going to be discussing today?
Okay, so as a person who's been to multiple trainings before and will hopefully go to multiple trainings in the future, I want to ensure that everyone knows what to expect. I'm not going to death by PowerPoint you and read this to you word for word, but this is what I hope to accomplish in the short amount of time that you've graciously given us today. I should say that virtual training does offer many benefits, but does also hinder the ability for me to interact with you on face-to-face level. So I'll reiterate what Heather said, and if you have any questions, just be sure to ask them. So by the end of our time together, if I haven't reached our goals, please let me know, and we'll try to address it. With that being said, on the screen are the goals of the training. So as I stated earlier, in 2021, a law was passed that is included in the Iowa Securities Code. This law gives added protections to ensuring that our seniors' lifelong investments are protected. In case you want to read the code, I'll add a link at the end of the presentation, and it is included, as I said earlier, in the Securities Code in Iowa Code Chapter 502, Sections 801 through 801 through 810. So where do you, as a financial expert, play into this? Well, you could potentially be the front line in helping save your senior investors' investments. Throughout this training, I'll provide you with some information on how to identify cases, most importantly, what some red flags are, how to initiate a review and hold of potential cases, and a brief overview of other legislation enacted around the country. Now, you're going to hear me use the term eligible adult, which is what is used in the Iowa Code when talking about senior financial exploitation. And important to remember is 65. If you have a client 65 or older who is a victim of financial exploitation, they are considered an eligible adult. Further definitions and other important things to consider will be provided when the in-depth overview of this law is done later in the presentation. So why are legislators around the country providing more emphasis on providing protections to senior investors? The answer to this question is easy, and I'll provide some statistics in the following slides that will help you understand. It essentially boils down to the fact that there is an increasing number of individuals who qualify as seniors in America and in Iowa. With the increase in seniors, there's an increase in the wealth that seniors have, both in investments and in assets. If you take an increase in the number of individuals with an increased amount of money and throw in some cognitive decline, this equals the opportunity for more victimization. Our legislators and industry professionals are recognizing this potential for this emerging crisis. Now, this has led to multiple agencies and organizations to make protecting seniors a priority, and Iowa took that step last year. Now, as I identified earlier, our law was created to help protect senior investors. What you will need to know, and we will discuss further, is that you, as a financial expert, have the opportunity to delay a disbursement or transaction if you feel one of your senior clients is being financially exploited. I'll provide you with all the legal definitions later, but if you conduct an internal review and find the likelihood of exploitation will occur, you can delay that disbursement or transaction, notify a permissible third party, notify our division, and we will begin an investigation. If you do decide to make a report to the insurance division and or a permissible third party, you are granted immunity from any civil or administrative liabilities. Sounds pretty great, right? So you can really be the front line in helping protect our seniors. So let's work together to do that. How and who you make the report to, what steps you need to take after the report is made, time the disbursement or transaction delay is good for, and privacy and confidentiality concerns will also be discussed. I do want to tell you that on the Iowa Insurance Division website, we have an easy online reporting form, as well as links to the code and other training opportunities.
So again, our interests are aligned with you in protecting senior investors. The information we'll be covering today will not only help you in identifying the exploitation, but more importantly, the steps you can take to intervene and protect the investor. So Elijah, why is there such a focus on the financial exploitation of seniors?
So, according to the U.S. Census Bureau in 2019, there was an overall population in the state of Iowa of 3.15 million people. Of those over 3 million Iowans, 17.5% are over the age of 65. Nationally, our population consists of 52.4 million individuals who are classified as an eligible adult. That number will increase to 80 million by 2040. As the number of individuals aging increases, the disparity between children and older Americans decreases. Looking at the picture attached, in the 1980s, there were far more children than individuals 65 and older. Almost 32% children and only 11.3% 65 and older. Fast forward to a little more than a generation later, and that disparity is rapidly closing. It is estimated by the year 2040, those age groups will be within 5% of each other. 20.4% for 65 and older, and almost 26% for children. Also, in 1960, the life expectancy was 68. Today, the life expectancy is 76 for men and 81 for women. And I can only imagine this expectancy is going to continue to rise. Additional areas of concern are that 28% of older Americans live alone. Also, the number of people 65 and older who will suffer from Alzheimer's disease will more than likely double. By 2050, it is estimated that there will be 13.8 million older Americans suffering from Alzheimer's disease compared to 5.8 million today.
Elijah, I've heard you talk about how the population of Iowa is getting older. Is that the only reason there's a focus on senior financial exploitation?
Well, no, as the number of baby boomers continue to increase and outnumber previous generations, their assets have exponentially grown. Recent NASA statistics found that baby boomers are worth an estimated $8.5 trillion. In the next 40 years, that number will increase by an additional 11.6 trillion. Additionally, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that between the years 2013 and 2017, there were $6 billion worth of losses or attempted losses from seniors' accounts. Furthermore, it was found that the average loss per victim was approximately $34,000. While those numbers are alarming, an additional area of concern is the number of older individuals who are identified as victims of a financial exploitation by a recent survey. According to an elder investment fraud survey conducted in 2016, 1 out of every 5 citizens over the age of 65 has been a victim of financial exploitation. Now, I'm not saying that every single person over the age of 65 is going to become a victim of financial exploitation, but statistically speaking, if the research has identified the number of individuals as 1 in 5 becomes a victim, and our numbers of older Americans are increasing, there's going to be a larger sum of exploited older adults. Another alarming side effect of senior financial exploitation is that multiple studies have found that victims of senior financial exploitation have an increased amount of poor health outcomes. Some of the increased outcomes are shame, depression, anxiety, self harm, and unfortunately, suicide. Additionally, exploited older adults are more likely to be hospitalized. Also, those experiencing financial exploitation have higher mortality rates than those experiencing physical abuse. Furthermore, it has been identified that senior financial exploitation has become the fastest growing category of elder abuse in America.
Again, the reason there has been so much attention on this topic is because of the societal changes Elijah mentioned. There are more people that are over age 65. More of these people are being diagnosed with cognitive disorders, and these changes combined with the wealth of these seniors puts them in a position to be a prime target for victimization. So after a year of investigations, Elijah, generally who is exploiting seniors and how are they being exploited?
Yeah, there is a wide array of individuals who financially exploit older Americans. Now, what is most commonly thought of is family members or caretakers. I can tell you in all cases of elder abuse, financial exploitation of seniors by caretakers accounted for 13.8% of total reported cases of elder abuse. Caretakers are often thought of as the primary suspect when it comes to senior financial exploitation on a personal level, justifiably so. And later on, we will discuss some more specific red flags to look out for regarding caretakers. Now, as a financial expert, it's my hope that at the end of this training, you'll be able to identify any bad actor, whether it be a newly reconnected family member or an online persona looking to make a quick buck. Some of the more common online schemes that come to mind are the grandparent scheme, computer viruses, romance scams, IRS or federal government employee impersonation. Take your pick. So, speaking of romance scams, if you talk to an older investor and they have a new significant other, you might want to check the legitimacy of it. I do want to talk a little bit, and I'll give you some stats later, but over the cases that I'm seeing, over one third of them involve a romance scam. Some of these romance scams are someone who is real and inserts themselves into the senior's life, while others are online romance scams that involve the senior investor being targeted through social media sites or dating sites specific for seniors. One thing you see in almost every one of these cases, though, is that the scammer is filling a void that is recently left, either by a recent death or of a spouse or divorce. The scammers fill that void in loneliness by dedicating hours a day talking to the senior consumer or chatting with them online. Now, it's not all bad, so I want to give a little bit of a success story regarding a romance scam. In one of my early investigations, an older individual who had recently lost his wife developed an online relationship with someone who he thought was a female. This bad actor was able to convince him to invest $25,000 into a Bitcoin wallet since she was stuck in Egypt and needed money to get her passport back. After getting this money, they attempted then to access a securities account in the victim's name and tried to launder an additional $120,000 through the victim's investment account. So, without the proper steps taken by a proactive compliance department, this victim could have been out much more. Now, this victim did lose funds, but it is extremely common for victims to make multiple disbursements for the scammers before it is caught. Many cases that are reported to us don't get reported until there are multiple disbursements from the accounts, but please don't let that discourage you from making the report. So recently, I do want to add there's been an increase in the number of investigations that have been opened up by state regulators for precious metals fraud. Telemarketers, online means, and other avenues are utilized to convince investors, many of whom are seniors, to liquidate their retirement funds and invest in precious metals. The individuals who are contacting senior investors, much similar to the romance scam, will spend hours, if not days, communicating with their victim. They are preying on that loneliness and using that to build their trust. They then price gouge the metals buyer and charge very large fees. A recent report by the SEC found that from 2019 to 2020, there was an almost 100% increase in state enforcement actions against commodities or precious metal dealers.
And I'll to go ahead and take a moment just to ask a question that we do have in the chat. Matthew asks, a lot of times the issue I run into is that seniors get money put into annuities with a long surrender period that they didn't understand. Will there be anything to help those seniors that we don't catch in the 30-day free look period? And that's a great question. I think that, as Elijah mentioned, fraud or maybe what's not in the best interest of an investor does come into play, and we are interested in hearing about those types of cases too. So definitely reach out, contact us, even if it's not something that may fall in the category of a senior financial exploitation. We've got resources to investigate and other bureaus within the division that we can refer cases like that to as well. So as you can see, exploitation does come in many forms. These perpetrators get pretty creative. So Elijah, you made a reference earlier that many cases of senior financial exploitation go unreported. Why is that?
Yeah, the reporting barriers are out there, and they're something that sometimes can be out of our control. However, our hope is that through this training, through our partnerships, and through a collaborative approach to these cases, we can eliminate some of these barriers. Your developed relationships with clients will help in identifying red flags. Plus, knowing the avenues and organizations of who to report to gives you the opportunity to be the real hero in all of this. You can be the front line in stopping exploitation, and we are given an awesome opportunity to work together to help protect your client's nest egg. The first barrier we'll discuss is isolation. Many times, offenders will utilize their power and control, especially in the situation where the offender is a caretaker, to isolate the victim from other family members or friends. Another factor to consider that is if the senior does not have family members to report the victimization to. If one of your clients has no or limited family members or friends, they will be isolated from reporting. Also, be on the lookout for threats of retaliation, as they can be very common. When seniors fall victim to financial exploitation, a fear of losing their abilities to control their own finances will occur. Admitting they've become a victim to financial exploitation could lead to a loss in those abilities to make financial decisions, so the victim may not report the exploitation. Also, many times, senior financial exploitation victims are embarrassed when they learn that they have been exploited. Not wanting to reveal the embarrassment or the fact that they may bring shame to the family could cause a non report. As their financial expert, you should be able to spot these right away and notify the proper individuals. Lastly, reporting systems can be extremely complicated. When I was tasked with examining our current reporting methods, I went out to look at what other states were doing and what agency is responsible for taking the report. Who can they even tell, or how do they gain access to them? When encountering cases of senior financial exploitation, making a report is as easy as completing an online form through the Iowa Insurance Division website.
Elijah talked about the variety of schemes employed by these perpetrators and the reasons why cases go unreported. Since you're in a position that can intervene in exploitation, we want you to know what to look for. Elijah, what are some of the red flags to be looking for? I think we may have lost Elijah for a moment, so let me go ahead and just introduce some of the red flags, and he'll be back up with that on the slide. There are many things that can be considered a red flag when a senior is being financially exploited. Knowing these red flags, and more importantly, getting to personally know your clients and what is the norm for them, could potentially help save their nest egg. Part of knowing who your clients are and what their habits are will dramatically increase your ability to notice when there are sudden changes to habits on their accounts. If your client has previously made their goals apparent and it goes against what they have told you during their entire relationship, it is a clear indicator that something is going on, or has or is going on. Be wary of someone new entering the senior's life. If someone new in the senior's life starts showing up to your office or makes phone calls with the senior, they have potentially identified a senior to victimize. You may notice an increase in nervousness or anxiety when discussing their accounts, and someone new is around. What may follow is the senior surrendering their control of their finances, including their will, trust, or beneficiary designations to that person. It is uncommon for your client to write checks, then especially writing checks made to cash, or they will begin using an app or online based account you need to be asking more questions about why this has begun to increase. It's possible that you may be seeing suspicious signatures on checks or other documents, either authorizing transactions or disbursements or making changes to the account. This may apply to situations in which the senior is living in a care facility or is being cared for by an in-home care agency. But if there is an increase in care costs and or discrepancy of assets, this is a clear sign of financial exploitation. If a family member is responsible for care of the senior and there is an unexplained increase in care costs, start asking more questions. Are they using more and more money each month for random repairs or items that don't make sense? Or an in-home or outside of the home? These costs have increased more, more money is being liquidated, and all of a sudden, the caretaker, many times a family member, starts showing up in a brand new Chevy truck or is making numerous trips to the casino, or a host of different things can be considered red flags. It is not the norm, so ask some questions to justify that suspicion.
All right, Heather, apologies about that. My computer went black, so I need to take just a minute to get us to the correct slide and show you where I need to be.
In the meantime, I'll start talking about some more red flags. Um, Talking about caregivers or the introduction of a new individual in the lives of seniors, you should be also on the lookout for the appearance of family members who previously had no or limited involvement in their lives. Also, if there's an increase in fear or submissiveness towards a caregiver or a change in their appearance, grooming, or hygiene, these are additional red flags. If those caregivers or newly introduced family members are isolating the senior from family members or friends, or there are increases in schedule changes, asking more questions is appropriate. Many times, those who financially exploit or abuse seniors will isolate their victims from family members or friends. Those who are the closest to the senior, potentially you, will notice subtle changes in behavior, hygiene, activities, and those internal warning bells should be sounding off. When discussing these issues of seniors who are exploited by online schemes, be on the lookout for frequent password resets and online account changes. This was previously discussed, but it's important to know that many times that those that are exploiting seniors will look for ways to digitally access their accounts. Also, we know that sounds too good to be true. It probably is. If you have a senior that is overly excited about a new investment opportunity, take the time to ask more questions, figure out what that investment is and who is involved. Also, something to consider is that if you begin seeing a combination of any of these red flags, chances are someone is being exploited. The more you know your client, the more you'll be able to identify those changes and be able to identify these flags. These changes may be subtle, but could potentially save your client's investments. While this is not a comprehensive list of red flags, it should help you in identifying cases of senior financial exploitation. So I'd just like to add that knowing your client makes it easier to spot these signs overall. If you dismiss a sign or two, it's important to make that report, even if it is months later, because you're stopping potential further future exploitation. And when we talk about asking more questions, you may be asking yourself, what's that mean? You're the investigator, not me. Well, what we mean is trusting your instinct. Reconfirm that suspicion. You may want to try a phone call without the potential perpetrator on the phone so you can ask the client more questions about what they are using the money for. Or you could be asking the client to come in to sign paperwork in person and separate your client from the perpetrator to ask them more questions to reconfirm that suspicion. All right, you know about the schemes used and the reporting barriers, and we've given you some of the red flags to be on the lookout for. Now let's talk about other ways in which government and regulators are addressing the exploitation of seniors.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So NASA developed its model legislation to protect vulnerable adults from senior financial exploitation in January of 2016. Since its inception, the Model Act has been adopted and implemented in some form by 32 states. Additionally, Missouri and Washington state had enacted similar legislation prior to 2016 to protect seniors from financial exploitation. I don't want to make this confusing by providing a bunch of other legislation, but the NASA Model Act includes 5 core features. Those 5 core features are included within Iowa's law. There are 2 FINRA rules that address senior financial exploitation. FINRA Rule 2165 guides financial advisors on cases of senior financial exploitation, and Rule 4512 addresses customer account information, and there are recent additions for trusted contacts on the account and notifications to those trusted contacts. It is important to note that though this rule change did not occur in Iowa, and in order to be granted immunity within our state, you must abide by our disbursement hold periods, which will be discussed shortly. Next, the Senior Safe Act was passed in 2018 as part of the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act. The Senior Safe Act is also dedicated strictly to protecting seniors from financial exploitation.
Now let's take a closer look at how the Iowa law protects Iowa seniors.
So, as I briefly talked about, NASA's Model Act was utilized to draft our law, but it is not exact replica of the Model Act. Seeing that we are operating in Iowa and talking about Iowa victims, I wanted to make sure that we spend time addressing this area so we all have a clear understanding on what to report, when to report, who to report to, and how to file a report. To start, I will address the definitions section of this act. Now, we have already discussed eligible adult as someone who is 65 or older. An eligible adult can also be someone who's classified as a dependent adult. A dependent adult is someone who is 18 or older and is unable to protect their own interest or unable to perform or obtain services necessary to meet essential human needs. Next, financial exploitation is defined as wrongfully and knowingly depriving an eligible adult of money, assets, or property, or to obtain control or otherwise use, convert, or divert the benefits, property, resources, or assets of an eligible adult uh, by sorry of an eligible adult by intimidation, deception, coercion, fraud, extortion, or undue influence. That's a lot of words. So summed up, did the suspect know what they were doing and take away money, assets, or property from the eligible adult? Or did they take control or convert the eligible adult's items by deceit, coercion, or fraud? If either of these is correct, then you have a case of financial exploitation. A permissible third party is someone that the eligible adult previously designated to receive notifications regarding the account. So, are you doing your best to ensure that there is a permissible third party or trusted contact on your client's accounts? Having the right person listed on the account is just another tool for you to utilize to ensure you are helping your clients. Bear with me here for a few minutes as this next part gets a little wordy, so I'm going to try and explain this to you as easily as I can. When you decide to make a notification of suspected senior financial exploitation, the law states that if a broker dealer, investment advisor, or qualified individual reasonably believes a financial exploitation of an eligible adult has occurred, has been attempted, or is being attempted, that broker dealer, investment advisor, or qualified individual may promptly notify the administrator. Now, you all, knowing all your clients' habits and patterns, determine that a financial exploitation has occurred, now may make a report to the insurance division. We're going to further discuss an incentive for reporting, which is immunity from civil and administrative sanctions, but it's important to understand all the options that are available to you. Currently, if you suspect a financial exploitation of an eligible adult has occurred and you have made that decision to file a report with the division, it's as easy as making an online report or giving us a call where we will start the reporting process that way.
Yes, we have an easily accessible online form on our website, which creates a written record of the notification not only for us, but for you as well. You can print the submission for your records and you'll receive an email notifying you of the submission. We are careful not to require an online submission as we want to make the reporting as efficient as possible. We feel it's more important to get the report timely, so if a phone call is easier, then make the call. I'll be sharing more information on that last slide to that end. You may have heard Elijah mention immunity as an incentive. So as you may be wondering how an individual may be granted that immunity.
Yep. So when addressing liability, there are two and immunity, there are two different sections within the new legislation that addressed immunity when making reports of financial exploitation. If a report is made to the Iowa Insurance Division and or a permissible third party, then you are immune from any administrative or civil liabilities that may come from your disclosure. Both sections cover that as long as you make the report reasonably and in good faith, you're covered. This portion of the legislation does not say you may be protected from civil or administrative liabilities. It says that you shall be immune from them. This should provide you with even further peace of mind that making the report and delaying that disbursement or transaction is the right thing to do. The protections are there, the reporting procedures are in place, and now you all have the tools for your toolbox, the arrows for the quiver, whatever you want to use when you encounter these cases. Delaying disbursements or transactions will be discussed next. So, if you have a client that wants to complete a disbursement or transaction that you feel will contribute to their financial exploitation, then you must initiate an internal review. Now, your business may have different ways that you complete your internal review. Either that's in reporting standards, documentation standards, or whatever standards you have. Just make sure that you follow them. The code was written with the intention that you don't automatically just hear a buzzword as it relates to elder exploitation and make a referral or escalate the situation through your company and stop what you're doing there. Just remember, if you have reasonable suspicion to believe an eligible adult is being financially exploited, ask enough questions, make the referral or escalate within your company. We're not saying that you should have a former FBI agent or investigator on your staff or someone or dedicated staff to compliance to conduct these internal reviews, but just ask the appropriate amount of questions in an interview with your client to justify your reasonable suspicion. The most important thing that you can do, and I ask you to do, is document. You never know what small piece of information you document will help in the long term investigation of the ones responsible for exploiting seniors. So if through your internal review, you determine that this disbursement or transaction will contribute to the exploitation of an eligible adult, then delay that disbursement or transaction. After the delay is initiated and you've decided to file a report to the insurance division to take advantage of that immunity, provide written notification of the delay and the reason for the delay to all persons authorized to transact business on the account. Now, this is an extremely obvious disclaimer, but if you think that an authorized person is the one responsible for the exploitation, then you shall not notify them of the delay. So when you notify the division of the exploitation, ensure that you provide us with the results of your internal review. Now, whether that's a copy of a report from your system or your notes, anything and everything can help. Our law states that you need to continue your review, however. I can tell you though that one thing that can hamper an official investigation when it gets to us is that when there's two simultaneous investigations occurring at the same time. We ask that if you encounter new information, forward that information to the insurance division and who you're working with. But please allow us to continue our investigation. If anything new changes, document it and inform the insurance division.
Yes, I'd like to take this opportunity now to ask another question. Eric is asking if we have any guidance that we can provide him for situations involving a vulnerable adult who is showing signs of diminished capacity, but hasn't been declared legally incapacitated and does not have anyone else to help out, such as a TCP, POA, or family member. Interested in just knowing best practices for servicing clients under those circumstances.
Yes, and I can tell you, and I'm not quite sure if I addressed it at the end, but I'll talk about it now, is we do have a great partnership with our area agencies on aging. There are, I believe, 7 different agencies that are regionally based throughout the state. They are elder rights specialists and advocates who are dedicated strictly to assisting seniors in situations similar as these. So that could be as simple as looking to see where your local area agency on aging office is located and placing a phone call to them, and they'll be able to assist you and guide you on what the best course of action would be for your client.
And I'd also like to add here that, sometimes the situations that you're encountering and you're seeing things that are signs that are a little unusual, you are probably one of the very first people that's seeing these signs because family members may not be close to the senior, and so that's why your job and witnessing and reporting and getting stopping a disbursement if you feel that that exploitation is occurring is even more important. And then there is another question here, but we're going to be getting to that here shortly. What does the state do after the report is made? So just hold tight here. We're going to be addressing that here in a minute. So you've delayed the disbursement or transaction. You've made that report of the suspected exploitation to the division. What's next, Elijah?
Okay, so if through your internal review you are able to determine that the disbursement or transaction does not contribute to the exploitation of an eligible adult, then you must proceed with that disbursement or transaction. However, if it would contribute to the exploitation, then the delay is valid for up to 15 business days. Now, if an agent of the Iowa Insurance Division petitions you, or in layman's terms, more than likely me, politely asks you to delay to that disbursement or transaction, you can delay that transaction or disbursement for 10 more business days. This will make the delay no longer than 25 business days. There is stipulation in the legislation that allows the opportunity that an interested party may petition to a court of competent jurisdiction to terminate, extend, or modify the delay of the disbursement or transaction. Now, it is also important to note that for immunity to be granted, a report to the division must be made within 2 business days of that delay of disbursement or transaction. I also want to talk about that in March of this year, FINRA Rule 2165 was updated. The new addition to this rule states that if the matter was reported to a state regulator, the delay can be extended for an additional 30 days, which equals 55 total business days. Unfortunately, though, to take advantage of the immunity within our state, delays are only good for up to 25 business days. The hope or the intention of the delays is that the offender gives up hope in trying to defraud the eligible adult and moves on. Also, this is where the importance of having a trusted contact on the account. During this time, can you identify a family member? Can you identify someone, either a family member or friend, that should be involved and help us remedy these situations? Next, record sharing is another important part of the new legislation. For us to be able to work together, information has to be shared. If you make a report of suspected senior financial exploitation of an eligible adult, the legislation states that you shall provide records or access to the records. Now, our division can request that information, or you can provide the information upon making the report of suspected exploitation. Now, it is my hope that if you take the time to protect your clients and to work with us, that you also provide the necessary information for us to further our investigation into the exploitation. However, please follow your company's policies and procedures and how and when you provide those reports. Now, the last issue that we're going to talk about when discussing our law is the training portion of the legislation. It states in the code that if the broker dealer or investment advisor shall provide training related to senior financial exploitation, as soon as practical, but no more than 1 year from hire. So if you know of any other investment advisors or people within your organization that fit within the category of a qualified individual, make sure they're aware of the new law. The Iowa Insurance Division will also assist and guide you along in those trainings. If you attend this training, it does satisfy the training requirement for the code. It is our hope to continue collaborating on future training projects, updates on current trends, and any other topics that could benefit our organizations.
The goal of training is not to impose more continuing education requirements on individuals. With more seniors being targeted, we want to address awareness of senior financial exploitation and the critical role you play in combating it. If you happen to have a group that you'd like us to train, or you'd rather us partner with your staff to tailor training to a particular topic, we'd be happy to do so. I'll be sharing more information on the last slide to that end. As we encourage reporting, you may be wondering about privacy and confidentiality. Elijah, why don't you talk to us about the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act?
Okay. So when we discuss privacy and confidentiality of your client's accounts and information, it's important we talk about the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, or as you're going to hear me refer to as GLBA. So GLBA was enacted in 1999, and a key aspect of the legislation focuses on keeping customers' non-public personal information private. Now, non-public personal information is further defined by GLBA as name, address, income, social security number, or even the fact that you're serving that person as one of your customers. If your customer hasn't previously authorized someone to receive that information about their accounts, you cannot share that public personal information. So as a couple examples, if a child of one of your client calls and wants to know how much their mom or dad has in their accounts because they're going to inherit it really soon, you cannot release any information related to that account. Similarly, if you're sitting in your office and you get a phone call from a person who believes their neighbor is being exploited by a new live-in girlfriend, GLBA prohibits you from releasing information to them unless obviously the account holder had previously authorized that release. Now, in this case, the neighbor has definitely highlighted a red flag for you. So you should document it and try to follow it up with a client meeting. But even though that neighbor did give you the useful information, you can't tell the neighbor any non-public personal information. So you may be wondering how these privacy requirements interact with our law and the reporting that we talked about as part of it. It's important to note that numerous federal and state authorities either require or encourage reporting cases of senior financial exploitation. Additionally, there are specific provisions of the GLBA and its implementing regulations that permit the sharing of this type of information under appropriate circumstances that may seem counter to customer notifications and opt out requirements. In short, while you can't tell the nosy neighbor or the inquiring daughter about your client's accounts, GLBA does not prohibit you from telling us about your suspicions of fraud and financial exploitation. So, to help with disclosure issues, NASA created a guide for developing practices and procedures uh, for developing practice and procedures for protecting senior investors and vulnerable adults. In this guide, there are several tips to help investment advisors and other financial agents be proactive if a situation like this does occur. One of the first things that NASA suggests you do to help address this issue is to implement proactive disclosure and contractual advance directive measures early in your relationships with your clients. If it is a long-term client, keep them updated and ask for updated information to include adding a trusted contact to the account. It is important to familiarize yourself with your client's accounts and know of any existing executors, trustees, and/or power of attorney arrangements. Also, develop policies and procedures related to planning for your client's futures and issues that may arise.
Elijah has talked about red flags to look for, Iowa's senior financial exploitation law, and the immunity it can provide you, and privacy and confidentiality considerations. But what are some of the things an advisor should focus on if this should happen to one of your clients?
It's a great question, and I've said this multiple times before, so this will be the last time you hear me say it. Build relationships with your clients. Within my first week of working with the Iowa Insurance Division, I spoke with a broker dealer agent who had a client that was being exploited for thousands of investment dollars. This agent was able to delay the disbursement because he knew his client. He knew his spending behaviors, knew what was normal and abnormal, and he documented every interaction he had with awesome notes. So when the bad actor came into this client's life and tried to defraud him, all of the agent's warning bells were going off. This wasn't possible without getting to personally know his client. Another important intervention strategy or technique that is suggested and placed into rule books all over the financial world is urging your clients to add a trusted contact to their account. More importantly, also educate your clients on what a trusted contact is. With many of the victims that I work with, they are simply uneducated on what a trusted contact can do. Assure them that trusted contacts can't make changes or trades on their accounts. So if you look back, cannot make trades or changes on their accounts and are only there in case something arises. So if you go back and look at your clients' accounts, how many of them deny adding a trusted contact and or leave it blank? Take the few extra minutes to address this and urge your clients that adding a trusted contact may save them money in the long run. Next, work with us to help solve these problems. As you all, who are individuals who work within the industry day in and day out, you know what the trends are, you know where and how your clients are losing their money, so communicate that with us. Finally, if you have a situation that you believe is financial exploitation, please make a timely report. Through my experience, I found it to be extremely difficult to follow up on and investigate cases with stale information. Many times, had that information been provided earlier on, the problem would have been solved much sooner. So when you find the exploitation, file the report or give us a call.
Again, we'll take a report any way you can get it to us. And more importantly, is getting us the information and getting it to us quickly. So, Elijah, what do we do when we receive a report of senior financial exploitation?
Great. And I knew that was a question that got asked to us during this, so I'll go ahead and answer it this way. So we'll get to it eventually. The most important thing to note about these cases is that each one is completely different. The schemes and the scams have similarities, but I choose to individualize the cases and not take a cookie cutter approach to them. I already addressed that if you're a qualified individual, you can make a report to our vision or to our division and receive the benefits of reporting. This doesn't mean that non-qualified individuals can't make reports. It just obviously triggers those certain protections to those qualified individuals. Now, if you are a qualified individual, at some point, I'll more than likely ask you to make a referral through our online reporting system, but it's not necessary. That doesn't mean that you can't just call me to make the report. The online reporting system allows you to enter a lot of helpful information, has tracking and notification abilities, and lets you securely upload documents. If you have questions whether or not a case would qualify, please don't hesitate to reach out. So, in addition to referrals provided through our online reporting system, I have also taken reports from people outside of the industry. Some of those reports have come from other government agencies, concerned family members, or the victims themselves. If I receive a referral for suspected senior financial exploitation, and if a securities nexus can be found, I will investigate those cases. One of the most important things that I can do in the beginning of these cases is document collections. I bring this up because oftentimes I'm waiting for investment firms to provide those documents, and that further extends our timeline for either getting the investigation started or for finding proper resources for victims. Now, I'm not asking you to violate your company's policies and procedures, but please provide documents as soon as possible. Also, remember, as I addressed earlier, that for immunity from civil or administrative actions to be granted, a report to our division must be made within 2 business days. So, what kind of documents do I look for? The documents that I receive, which provide the most information, are monthly statements. Also, information about the victim's linked banking account is extremely important. In the majority of the cases that we're seeing and I investigate, the money that leaves the investment accounts goes directly to a personal banking account. However, I do want to note there have been several cases where checks from investment accounts or wires have been sent directly to the scammers. Also, good contact information for all involved parties is crucial. After gathering your firm's information, identifying different financial institutions that I need to gather information from is done next. Typical turnaround for most banks for bank records is approximately 3 to 4 weeks. So the quicker I get the information about what financial institution the disbursements are going to, the better. One thing I'll do is, especially if the funds are going to local bank accounts, is to contact those banks directly. Let them know a subpoena for records is coming, and also let them know that I'm investigating a case of senior financial exploitation. By doing this, it is my hope that they further can be on the lookout for further exploitation of their clients. Now, while also trying to come up with a game plan for document collection, I almost immediately reach out to the victim. Most victims have documents, and I mean many documents that they can provide, which can be extremely helpful. Now, since I'm working with an older population, explaining to them how to combine them as a zip drive, scanning documents, converting Word documents into a PDF, and other technology tasks can be extremely difficult. Many times, also, victims are hesitant to provide that information to a stranger who called them out of the blue asking for financial documents. Now, how many of our older victims are victimized by a cold call? Then all of a sudden, some random guy who says he works for the state government calls and wants you to provide him with the financial and banking information. Now, I personally wouldn't trust that individual on the other end either. So a lot of the time that I spend on that initial contact is building relationship and trust with the victims and letting them know that I am there to help them and assist them through this. Now, sometimes, and this has happened a few times to help facilitate gathering documents from the victim, I'll jump in my car and go meet with them at their residence. So, since I began working with the insurance division, a main priority of mine has been to identify the offender and hold them accountable. Our division has a couple of different areas that can help assist us with that. One of these ways is through enforcement actions. Our enforcement bureau handles issuing cease and desist orders and in other administrative and civil actions. Now, this is just a small example of how we interact with our enforcement bureau. Now, regardless of if they are an unregistered agent or not, the Enforcement Bureau can assist in additional civil and administrative sanctions. And they can be utilized in cases in which an elder victim falls victim to an unregistered security and or has sold these unregistered securities by unregistered representatives. Additionally, within our division, there's a fraud unit that consists of certified law enforcement officers. If we have a case that we think could be criminally charged, we will refer that investigation to those officers for possible criminal actions. Now, we can't hold offenders accountable, though, without working with you all through this.
Elijah, we do have another question here I'd like to ask at this time. Any advice on dealing with a romance scam where the client does not appear to have any cognitive issues? However, it appears that someone is financially exploiting the client, preying on their loneliness. And I think we've actually had a couple of cases that are very similar to this in nature.
Correct. Yes. And sometimes those are very hard to convince a victim that they are, in fact, have fallen victim to a scam. So, my suggestion to you is to make the report. We have the resources that are here that we can help provide them to the victim and also individuals that we can get involved, whether that's the area agency on agings that I discussed earlier or other resources that are available. I can tell you if you have concerns, make sure you file the report and we can look into it further.
I know we talked early on about what we generally are seeing in cases of senior financial exploitation, but Elijah, can you provide a breakdown of what you've seen in your investigations?
Yep. So when I first began this job, I thought the investigations that I would be working would entail, victims losing a few $1,000s here and there. But little did I know the severe impact of what is actually going on and what our Iowa consumers are facing. So as you can see in the slide, those are the cases that we've received within the last year. And it's important to note that in almost all of these cases, the scammers are and have taken advantage of uncertainties in the market and the world instability. And thinking of one case specifically, a senior investor would pull a large amount of money out during a down month in the market, or especially during the early onset of the pandemic. So when he'd pull that money out of the market or out of his investment accounts, he would then reinvest these funds in alternative markets such as oil and gas, other private placements, and precious metals. Now, these scammers know, and especially with this case, knew how to exploit the fears and insecurities of our consumers. So it's up to us all to educate them on these trends. Also, we all know that these cases are not going to slow down anytime in the future. So if that's the case, what can we do to minimize that impact? And we can really work together to help solve these problems. Like I stated earlier, you all can definitely be the front line in helping protect our senior investors. So let's continue to work on doing that. If you have any questions or concerns, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Heather's going to bring some stuff up at the end, but reach out to me. We can talk through it and we can work through it. So that being said, I want to thank you all for joining today and taking the time. I'm going to turn it over to Heather, and she's going to address a couple more issues and give some more resources.
Yes, I do want to ask another question that's come in. What if the victim does not want to cooperate? What best can we do to document and yet look out for them?
Yeah, and that's where I think the importance of having a trusted contact on the account will come into play because that allows you to, notify them and let them know what's going on and just simply providing the report. I know it's really hard to help to say, just document and send the referral over. but you never know when you may get through to them. Just a short little story. I was working with a romance scam victim who, for the life of me, I could not get him convinced that he had fallen victim. And finally, after a couple months and talking and providing him resources, we were able to finally convince him, yeah, this is a scam, and he should probably stop sending money. So persistence, documentation, and reaching out for help and resources will definitely help.
Yeah, I think we're seeing more of this. This is kind of our area or Elijah's area of expertise. So, because each situation can be a little bit different, and having him as a resource, like I said, or like he said, we'll be sharing his contact information here on the last slide shortly. We did have another couple of questions come in, and very similar in nature here. Uh, One of the questions is are our options if they are being exploited but not over 65? And then another similar question, romance scam and under 65. Please, you who? So how do we deal with those cases where the person may not qualify as a senior and for the purposes of reporting and immunity?
Well, and so it's important to note that, regardless of if they're under 65 or not, they are the victim of a theft. So it is possible to make a police report if they're under the age of 65 to your local police department. If there is a securities nexus, Heather, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that we've actually done this before where they filed the report and we've had individuals within our agency also conduct an investigation if there's a securities nexus.
Yeah, most definitely. Like Elijah has mentioned in the past, if there's some way that we can find a nexus under our jurisdiction, we're going to want to use our resources and try to investigate. So, uh, again, even if you're not quite sure, contact us, ask us the questions, run the scenarios by us, and we can get that information and collect it and work the case ourselves, or make a referral to outside agencies if necessary.
I did see a couple people ask about the slides. So I will tell you that we will have those slides loaded up. And then after this meeting and presentation, we will hopefully load the video up as well. So that'll be available for you all too.
Yes. So it doesn't appear that there are any more questions, but don't be afraid. I'm going to give us some more information here. And then in the meantime, if someone wants to type in any more questions, we'll be happy to address them. So I'll direct everyone to this last slide. As you'll see, there's some contact information for Elijah, his telephone number and his email. Please reach out to him if you'd like to schedule further training or if you have any questions. You'll see that also that there's a link to report financial exploitation and a link to Iowa's senior financial exploitation law. Our website, if you just go to the iid.iowa.gov that's on there, that link will get you to our website and you can just type in the search field senior financial exploitation. We have a landing page, it's got a lot of great information on it, and we do plan to place the recording of this training on the page too. So in the upcoming days, you'll find that and feel free to check back and share that with others that were unable to attend today. As I see there are no further questions, I want to thank you all for your time and very thoughtful questions today. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.